Um, yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for coming. The experience I have for this class is purely just from paying attention to nature my whole life. I've lived in the Southwest my whole life, so the creatures around here are pretty familiar to me. As a profession, I am a nursery grower, and I've been doing that for at least 25 years. Where a lot of people think maybe in nursery we try to kill all the bugs and sterilize the environment so our plants grow better, but it's actually the opposite. It's very important to invite nature into even a big commercial nursery, because there's a lot of things out there, a lot of animals out there, bugs and birds and everything else, that help us keep the bad bugs off the plants. So even in my profession, I do a lot of kind of balancing, trying to help balance ecosystems for the better of everybody, So I'll talk more about it in the PowerPoint. I think I'll get straight into it. I'll share my screen here, and that stuff will come up. So there's the first slide. My name is Jonathan Manning. Sure, I'm a certified arborist and a nurseryman, and my email is there. So feel free to email me with any questions, interesting pictures, whatever you want. Something you've sighted in your yard. I just saw a bright red cardinal for the first time in my yard, which I didn't even know they lived here, but I finally saw one in my yard. So if you see something like that, it'd be interesting to hear about it. So anyway, use my email for any kind of questions you have, things like that. So the first thing I do want to talk about with this is that you do have to encourage. This is about encouraging a balanced ecosystem in your own yard. You can't do much about the neighbors, you can't do much about the rest of the town, but you can work on your own yard, and you can invite these creatures in, and by providing all of what they need to have a balanced ecosystem. And remember, that is not killing everything that you don't like so that the ones that you do stick around. It's about providing shelter and water, and accepting that some things are going to be out there that are part of the balance. You might not be your favorites, but they're part of the ecosystem, and they're important. So if you want the good ones that you like to be around, sometimes you have to deal with what they might do to the balance of all the other things around. If a good example is butterflies, everybody loves butterflies, but when the caterpillars of a butterfly eat something in your yard all the way down to nothing, people don't like butterflies much. Or I don't even know, sometimes I think people think like they hate caterpillars, but they love butterflies. So that's a good example of, like, sometimes it's about balance. The whole thing's about balance. So we're going to try to talk about all the things that could live in your yard, take up residence, and maybe a little bit about what they do for you and against you, but how important they are to the balance as a whole. So from there, we will talk first about pesticides. I'm not totally opposed to pesticides, but I do like that I never start with pesticides. How about that? There's always a lot of times there's ways to balance that ecosystem. There's always a few bad bugs out there, but if you let the good bugs survive that help you eat the bad bugs, you can create this good balance. And lizards eat bad bugs, and birds eat bad bugs, and all these things. So lots of things can help you control pests, for example, including scorpions, cockroaches, crickets, all that, if you don't use pesticides that are broad spectrum and persistent. So that means they spray around your house, not for a specific bug, but they spray poison that kills all bugs. And it usually kills amphibians too, and other things that get across its path. And persistent means that it keeps killing them for a long period of time. Those are the ones you would like to avoid if you want to keep a healthy balance in your yard ecosystem. So sometimes, if you want to resort to pesticides to kill a certain bug that you just cannot, that's way out of balance, and they're wiping out your favorite plant or something like that, then what I would recommend is you figure out exactly what bug that is and find the pesticide that is specifically made for just that bug. So for example, those caterpillars, a lot of people have trouble with caterpillars on their orange jubilees or yellow bells in the summertime, and sometimes they can eat every single leaf off of them. Even that's not a death sentence for the plant. I mean, if you cut them back, they'll grow right back. But if you want to avoid it before it happens, kind of save yourself the trouble, then use a pesticide with the ingredient called BT. It's it's a biological pesticide. That means it's not a chemical. It's a bacteria that you spray on the plant, and just caterpillars eat it, and just caterpillars die. So you're not killing ladybugs and, butterflies, adults, and things like that. You would just find out what you're trying to kill, and find the least toxic chemical if you're going to use it, and one that's specifically made for the kind of bug. I just hate to see people come into the nursery, they ask for, what kills everything, and they don't know, because they don't know what they're trying to kill. Their plant looks bad, their plant looks chewed up by something, and they don't know what it is. So just, try to put some effort into figuring out what exactly you're trying to kill out there, and use the least toxic chemical to the whole environment that would work on the bug that you're trying to do. So that's all I'll say about pesticides, but it's very important in trying to keep a good balanced ecosystem and bringing in all this nature into your yard. You won't have that if you're putting chemicals out there that are killing most of it. So another good thing to do is use native or desert adapted plants in your landscape. That's a good way to bring in native animals, and is to have native plants. They evolve together, they're adapted to the desert, both of them. They create the right kind of hiding places and the right kind of food sources and the right kind of everything for that native fauna to come into your yard if you have the native plants to attract them. So using native plants is good for all kinds of reasons, but especially if you're trying to attract nature, then attract it with what plants they're used to being around and living and eating. And a good resource for what plants would work great for native landscape is amwa.org. That is Arizona Municipal Water Users Association. And they have tons of resources on their website as far as design and plant selection and irrigation and all these things. But you can find lots of good things on that website as far as picking the right plants that are well adapted to our desert, and that might be a really good environment for these native animals to live in. So there's some of the animals that I'll talk about. The first one is bugs, and they're not as interesting and fun as the rest of this presentation, but I do like to bring them up because there's bugs out there that, as I said, that help us eat the bad bugs. So some of them are really inconspicuous, but there's a few that live here year round. I think people understand that ladybugs do that and praying mantises do that. Both of them are very good things to have in the landscape, but the ladybugs are very seasonal. They only come around when there's lots of aphids in the spring, and then they disappear. So, but this one, green lacewing, does about the same thing as ladybugs do. They eat all kinds of little bugs that they can wrap their mouth around, aphids, mites, spider mites, white flies, all these little things. And the adults eat bugs and also their larva. That's a green lacewing larva eating a caterpillar twice its size. But they're bugs that really clean up the yard of all the bad bugs, keep everything in balance. And they're bugs that are completely adapted to our climate all year round. I see them in the summer, I see them in the winter, spring, fall, and you don't have to buy them and put them in your yard. If you create this nice landscape that has places for them to hide and bugs for them to eat, then they'll be around. I just like to get people familiar with what they look like. So if you see those around, don't think they're a bad bug. Definitely don't smash them. You find them around your porch light a lot of times at night because they are nocturnal. So green lacewing is a very, very good bug. Not quite as known as ladybugs, but do probably even a better job of balancing out our ecosystems than ladybugs do. That's the eggs of green lacewing. So just in case you see those little, it's like weird, it's little hairs that they hang straight down from a little branch or leaf stem, and there's a little white egg on the end of each little strand, and they hatch out into those larvae that then grow into the adult green lacewing. So look out for that one. The next one is assassin bug, and there's other bugs that look very similar to this with the orange and black. It's a true bug, the immature ones on the right and the mature ones on the left. The mature ones, like on the left, they can fly, not very well, but they can kind of barely fly from plant to plant to get around, but they spend all day eating other bugs too, all the same ones that I talked about. So another good bug to have around, like the pesticide, just educate yourself about, look it up, take a picture and take it in and search it, make sure it's that one. And if it is, definitely don't purposely kill these when you find them out in the yard. They're helping you. That's an egg case of an assassin bug. So sometimes that's very unique too. If you see those around, a lot of people see those and think it must be some kind of bad bug and smash them. So that's about 20 of them getting ready to hatch out of there. So you smash one of those, you're killing a lot more than just one. So watch out for those too. That's a egg. You'll find them underneath leaves, on the bottom side of leaves in the garden thing, wherever. So that's that with the bugs. The beneficial insects, both of those last ones would be. So now butterflies and their hosts. So butterflies, as I said, are two obviously stages. There's caterpillars and there's butterflies. Caterpillars have to eat some kind of food source, and usually it's pretty specific. Like the caterpillars of a certain butterfly only eat this kind of plant, usually. And so we'll talk a little bit about the butterfly, a little bit about what their caterpillars eat. Butterflies eat nectar. So they have long tongues, whatever, and they stick them in flowers, drink nectar. So pretty much any flowers that have nectar in them, butterflies will live on for the energy they need to keep going and breed and lay eggs and then more caterpillars. So it's the caterpillars that are very specific in what they eat. And the first one, or I'm sorry, this slide is just to show a nice little environment where butterflies might love to come in. See the white flowers of star jasmine blooming on the right. The butterflies would love to drink the nectar of that. There's a water feature on the left. It's like a clay pot that water just runs over the surface. Really, really shallow water that they can land on the side of and drink from is a very good way to bring in butterflies. They need water also, like everything in the desert. And then if you had in this landscape specific plants that the caterpillars would eat, that'd be even better. But even just having a little bit of flowers blooming year round and a little bit of water source, you'll bring in butterflies as they're traveling through. So this monarch butterfly, which most people, that's pretty remarkable story about their migration. I won't go back too far into that, but let's see here. Sorry. So the butterflies are big. They look very similar to the next one we're going to talk about, but these are a little bigger. True monarchs are a little bigger. Their caterpillars eat milkweeds, and there's a lot of different kinds of milkweed. There's desert milkweed. This is the one that's native. If you want to stick with native plants, that'd be a great one to use. It's really thin stems, and very desert adapted. But if it's a milkweed, monarch butterfly caterpillars would eat it. So that's a monarch adult. Frozen up here. There's a monarch caterpillar, and pay attention real quick because they're very similar to the next one. They have those little antennas front and back, two sets, two in the front, because usually if you see a monarch butterfly, they're going to be on the move. It's kind of hard to see exactly what kind and what pattern is on the wings and all that. But the caterpillars are easy. They're just sitting there eating away all day long. So caterpillars are very easy to tell apart. So if you see that black and white and yellow stripes with the two antennas in the head and two antennas in the tail, that's the larva of a monarch. And that's a different type of milkweed there that they're eating away on. So this is the next one that looks very similar, but they're a little smaller. So orange butterfly, right? They kind of look the same as monarchs out in the landscape, but this is a queen butterfly. So a little bit smaller. The pattern on the wings is different, but not, they're orange and black. And like I say, when they're fluttering around the yard, they're kind of very easy to mistake for one another. But the larvae are very different. See the 3 sets of antenna, 3 instead of 2. But the same kind of black and yellow and white stripes on them. And the host is milkweeds again. So very similar butterflies, in all ways, but they are 2 different kinds. And chances are, if you've seen one around, it's probably a queen butterfly. They're much, much more common in Phoenix. But there is monarchs here too, somewhere along their migration. So this one is a Gulf fritillaria butterfly. And these ones only eat passion vine. Their caterpillars only eat passion vine. So if you've ever had a passion vine, you've probably had it obliterated at least once by the caterpillars of this. I don't know how they find them. Passion vines aren't very common in Phoenix. I mean, they grow well here, but it's not one of the most common plants you see in everybody's yard. But if you have one, they'll find it. And once or twice a year, the caterpillars usually eat every leaf off and do their cycle, and then you get a bunch of these butterflies. Another orange butterfly, a little bit different pattern on the back, but these ones you can really tell apart because on the bottom of their wing, those little, it's hard to tell in the photo, but where it looks silver, it's like a mirror. It's so shiny. So they have like these little spots on the bottom of their wings. So that's one telltale sign that it's a Gulf fritillaria butterfly. And there's a passion flower that they're drinking nectar from right there. I mean, the adults would drink nectar from other flowers too, but there's its favorite host for its caterpillars, providing a flower for the adults at the same time. So that's the larva, the caterpillar of a Gulf fritillaria butterfly. Black spikes on an orange body, and there he is eating a passion vine leaf. There's a passion vine on a fence, leaves, and see how many varieties there are. These are just the flowers, but it's endless. You can get all kinds of passion vines. As far as I know, they eat them all. And no matter what kind of passion vine it is, they'll eat it. So any of them make a real nice landscape plant. Passion vines if you want fruit, like passion fruit, they do grow here too. I've known lots of people who've harvested a big crop of passion fruit at the end of the summer. But you have to buy the fruiting variety, and usually they have them in the tropical fruit section of nurseries. And if you want that as an added benefit, you can also get the fruiting variety, but not all make fruit. Some are just flowers, and the flowers fall off without making fruit. So they are also all frost sensitive, which means, I mean, the last couple of years you probably wouldn't have had a problem, but if you live on the outskirts of town where it gets a little colder and we happened to go through a winter where we had some frost, you might lose it back to the ground, like it would die back to the ground, and then they would grow back the following spring. Still not a problem. Same thing as when the caterpillars eat them all. They eat all the leaves off of them and they come right back. So most plants are able to deal with that. It's a natural event, and they can grow back from it without any permanent damage. So the next butterfly is black swallowtail, and its hosts are fun stuff to grow in the garden. So black swallowtails, the caterpillars like to eat parsley, dill, fennel, rue. Every time I've grown rue, I find these caterpillars on them. And like I say, all that stuff's kind of fun herbs to have in the garden, and also host this butterfly. There's an adult on drinking nectar from dill flowers. So again, the adult's drinking nectar from the flowers of the same plant that its caterpillar eats. They tend to be specific to these plants. So this one has quite a range of plants that it eats, but they're all real nice little garden herbs. So these kind of herbs, let me go through. Dill and fennel you would grow in the winter here. I don't have any luck with them in the summertime, so it's probably not a good time to plant those seeds right now. If you wait until end of September, 1st of October, dill and fennel grow really good from seed here, and they grow really good all winter long without any problem at all. I would probably do the same thing with parsley, although parsley does have a better chance of living into the summer a little bit, just because it doesn't go to seed quite as fast. And rue is a year-round bush that you can have at all times for these butterflies. So black swallowtail larvae, and when you scare them or accidentally squish them, poink, those two little orange things come out of their head. And it's like a defense mechanism. They stink a little bit if you actually got up, not horribly, but if you got up on them and tried to smell them, they would. And it's mainly, I think, just to scare away birds that might try to eat them or other predators. It's like anytime they get scared, those two orange things come out of their head. It's like a scent gland. So that's a unique characteristic of their larva. So there's some dill blooming again. And also, I mentioned that a lot of these things reseed themselves. So if you do grow dill or even parsley, I've had to do it, fennel, if you grow it one winter, it dies in the summer. But if you leave these flower heads to make seed, they fall off, sit in the, you can collect them if you want and put them back out there. But I've also had many cases where if I'm growing these in my garden and I let all the seeds fall off, the seeds sit there through the summer, through the time that the plant doesn't like. And right when it's time to grow them from seed again, they come up all by themselves from the ground if there's water available. So really all you got to do is start watering again in October, and bloop, they come, that's called naturalizing, and they do it very easily. Dill and fennel and even parsley can naturalize themselves here very easily, where they just come up on their own in your garden every year if there's water available. Also, the flowers of these plants are one of the best known for giving food to beneficial insects. Like the first two that we talked about, they can also eat nectar, pollen, nectar, but ladybugs love to eat the nectar and drink the pollen from these kind of flowers. So they're a very good source of food for beneficial insects also. There's lots more beneficial insects, by the way. I just brought up two to kind of get to the rest of the fun stuff, but there's a lot of little insects out there that are helping us in the garden, and these kind of flowers provide more food for them. Last one, this was another swallowtail, right? So kind of similar in looks, but the name says it, they're giant compared to the other one. Regular black swallowtails are much smaller. Giant swallowtail is a big butterfly, and the host is completely different. It's citrus trees, not these little herbs you grow in the garden. It's citrus trees. And so there's again, the adult is drinking nectar from citrus flowers, and the larva is eating away citrus leaves right there. And to me, that larva looks a whole lot like bird poop, right? It's one of those things that is unique about this caterpillar. They have camouflage. That's what they use for camouflage. So they look a whole lot like a little bird dropping there, and that protects them from birds catching them right away, and helps them hide there on the citrus trees. So that's their unique characteristic. And they also have those two orange scent glands that the other black swallowtail has also. So you got a couple different methods to stay safe here, from camouflage to those scent glands. Next category is lizards and toads. So lizards, I think everybody loves lizards, especially when they see that they eat crickets, roaches, and scorpions. Nothing we've talked about so far helps you get rid of those, the pests. And honestly, I don't believe scorpions are very easy to kill with pesticide, even if you try. You have to actually hit them with it. It's a hard deal. So to me, it's a much better way to get rid of scorpions and roaches is to have predators out there in the yard that eat them. So it's much more effective, honestly, not just better for the environment, but I believe it's more effective. So if you're worried about scorpions and roaches and crickets, things like that, these bigger things like lizards and especially toads, if you're lucky enough to have toads anywhere close by, if you live by any of the water area, riverbeds or rivers or even big canals, a lot of times if there's enough water around, you'll get toads to come in your yard. And if you have a water source, they'll kind of take up residence, a shallow pond or something like that they can breed in. But I have had toads in my property I live on since I moved in, and never had a scorpion, as far as when the neighbors do, and the neighbors keep it real dry and don't have any toads around. So I don't know what that says, but I'll move on to lizards, which anybody can attract lizards to their yard. And this is just a really basic way to provide some habitat. So that little tiny shallow pan of water, there's one issue with having standing water around, and that's mosquitoes. And this little shallow pan kind of solves that problem, because every couple days you go out there and you squirt the hose in it until it overflows quite a bit, and you got a fresh water. And even it's so shallow that if you didn't, it would dry up in a couple days. So it does not provide a place for mosquitoes to breed in. And it's always a little place that if you go out there and get it filled up with the hose, all these desert animals would love to take a drink, and the rock in the middle of it gives them a place to land and kind of drink or jump onto, be on the edge of it without falling in, So the rocks that are piled up underneath that pan, very perfect place for lizards to crawl in and hide. That's what they like, is those piles of rocks, piles of sticks. trees, as I'll tell you about which ones like to grow or live up in trees, but the rock piles, people are afraid of rock piles too, because that's where scorpions live. That's where cockroaches live. But if you got lizards living in the same rock piles, that's the balance I keep talking about. You have, there's this balance between a scorpion might try to move in someday, but since the lizard's living in there full time, he's going to get eaten up. Let's see here. So the first one's little tiny fence lizards, we used to call them, bluebellies, tree lizard. They're probably 3 inches long, and was my favorite one to catch when I was a kid. But it's just the little fence lizards. You always see them running up and down brick walls, and they do love hiding in rock. Any crack they can slide into is perfect hiding space. And if you had that little shallow pan of water, I'm sure they'd be in there drinking when they can. And these things could eat any kind of bug that fits in their mouth, and they're fast and they're hunters, and that's all they do. And let's see, the next one's a big lizard. This one is not just long, probably 6-8 inches long, but they're hefty, fat, whatever you call it. And so these ones I do usually see up in mesquite trees, right up the trunk, so they hide kind of out of reach up in a mesquite tree, and they love that real craggy bark that mesquites have to climb. It's easy to climb because it's, they can grab on good. And again, eating every other bug that tries to hide in the cracks of that mesquite tree. And the scorpions that are most common in Phoenix are called bark scorpions, because their favorite habitat is hiding in the cracks of the bark of like a mesquite tree. Well, there's this guy up there living in the same habitat. Desert spiny lizards, that's a very good one to have around. A little more rare. I don't see them as much, but I do have a big one in a big mesquite tree that's been there a long time. Geckos, little Mediterranean geckos. They're not native, but man, they sure have taken hold here. And they same thing. These are nocturnal, so at night they come out and eat away at any kind of bug. You see them by the porch light a lot because that's where the bugs are. If you keep your porch light on at night, the bugs come around, and the same thing with scorpions. So you leave your porch light on, moths and bugs come to the porch light. Well, that's what scorpions eat. So they come to the porch light, and then geckos come and find all of it together there and eat whatever bugs they can. So geckos is a very good one to have around. They're not very big, 3 inches long, maybe 2 at the biggest, very biggest. And these are nocturnal, and they like to hide in a little bit wetter spots. You know where I find these every time is in the irrigation valve boxes, underground valve boxes for your irrigation system, like the tan or green boxes out in the yard. You lift up the lid, and it's usually a little moist down there, damp, and they love living inside those things. So you could recreate that, by having like a spot where you kind of wet with the hose more often, maybe put an upside down clay pot with a little hole in the end, an entrance that they can get in and out, just someplace where they can hide in the day. And then at night they come out and eat away. And toads. Like I say, toads are harder to get. You can, you might have them in your neighborhood. I bring them up because I would say toads are the best eaters of roaches and scorpions, but they're like, they need a little wetter environment. They need someplace kind of muddy they don't need standing water all the time, but they need someplace muddy to kind of burrow into in the day when it's hot. And then they come out at night and do nothing but eat bugs. They love underneath porch lights too. You might find one. And I like to bring it up just because a lot of people are afraid of toads. They think they are poisonous, but only if they have 2 big warts on the back of their neck, bigger than the rest, they're like sacs. And if you break those open, there's poison inside there. So I've seen many dogs try to bite them. Every dog I've seen try to bite them, they let go real quick, because when that poison pops in their mouth, it makes their mouth foam and taste horrible. So they spit out the toad hops away. I don't know. I've had people worry about their dogs maybe getting killed by toads. I've had 3 dogs in the same yard as like 100 toads for 20 years and never had a problem, but I can't guarantee that you wouldn't. If you have a dog that tends to try to chew up and eat anything, even inedible stuff, you might worry about it. But overall, I like to see people either leave these alone or almost encourage them to come around, because their benefits are much outweigh any kind of harm they could do, in my opinion. So birds, next category. The way to attract birds is by having trees, for one. I've seen my property go in 20 years from not one tree, just, weeds and Bermuda grass, to planted over 200 trees. And a lot of them are 25, 30 feet tall now. And it's like every foot taller those trees get, more birds come in. And a lot of them are native trees. Native birds love native trees. And I'm not positive, but I got to believe that it's because of the thorns that protect, when a bird's at the top of a thorny tree, they feel pretty safe, I think. I'm not sure, but like I say, I see much more birds gather in the tops of like a native mesquite tree with thorns, or a palo verde with thorns. So if you can have some kind of native tree, palo verde, mesquite, or ironwood, things like that, birds just love to make nests in them, and they love to perch up in the top of them because it's safe up there. The thorns protect them from any kind of predator that would try to climb up the tree to get to them. And once they're safe up there, that's a good place to breed, make nests, sing, hang out, whatever. So the more trees you get going, especially native trees, especially thorny trees, the more birds you're going to attract to your yard. And boy, is it wonderful when a whole flock of blackbirds will get in the top of a tree, and the sound of their singing, there's nothing like it. So just to have birds all over the yard. They eat bugs. All birds eat bugs at some point in their life. So even birds that aren't insectivores, some do it their whole life, but even like hummingbirds eat bugs. They catch mosquitoes and things like that, feed them to their young, So baby birds, they need protein to grow a lot faster than adults. So even birds that eat seeds and things when they're adults feed their babies bugs. So they're very wonderful at balancing that ecosystem and keeping those bad bug levels down. They'll never annihilate them, but they'll keep them at a level where they won't hurt anything. So a bird bath is always a wonderful thing too for some birds. Hummingbirds love hummingbird feeders, obviously, or planting plants that we'll talk about in the end of this course that attract hummingbirds. So those are ways to bring in. You know what? Another good tree for if you want a dual purpose, like edible landscape tree that attracts birds to nest in real good, is lime trees. Lisbon lemon and limes, both are very thorny trees. And I've had more nest in those trees than anywhere. They just love nesting in them. So that way you get a little fruit, you get a place for birds to live in. So those are two good trees for birds to nest in too. So here's some birds I've seen around. Top left is a woodpecker, Gila woodpecker, that live really well here. There's one that loves to bang on my metal roof to call to his friends. but they're very, like I say, they eat bugs all the time. Great thing to have around the yard. Then top right is a thrasher, brown thrasher. And again, bug eaters all the way. And they love making nests in my cactus. I have big cirrus cactus, organ pipes, things like that. They love making nests in the branches of cactus. Again, those thorns really protect them from predators, cats and all that, Bottom left is a cactus wren. A lot like a mockingbird, but kind of real specific to our area where there's lots of desert environment. And bottom right is cardinal, like the one I just saw. They do live here. They're beautiful in the landscape, being that bright red. There's not many birds with that kind of color around here. And so this is just a couple. There's just hundreds of species of birds that will come to a yard that has tall trees for shelter and nesting areas, a little bit of water, and lots of a healthy ecosystem, because that's what all the bugs that they eat, all those things. So you make a healthy ecosystem in your yard and these birds will come, and many, many more. There's a nest, a verdin nest. That's a little tiny bird called a verdin, and they make a really neat nest. It's hard to find the hole in it. It's a ball, like a hollow ball of grass or branches or whatever whatever they can find. But they fly in through the bottom, right through a little tiny hole into the inside. It's a interesting nest, but it's just an example of how native birds love making nests in native trees. So there's a dove eating cactus fruit, saguaro fruit. I have a row of prickly pear cactus, the really big green kind that we call nopales, and they make hundreds and hundreds of fruit that I can't I harvest some for myself, but can't ever get to all of them. And there is just lots and lots of doves, thrashers, cactus wrens, mockingbirds, all these birds out there eating up that fruit. So cactus fruit is a very good draw for lots and lots of kinds of birds, not just dove, but dove especially seem to really love cactus fruit. And there's a cactus wren eating the cactus fruit, as they do. And hummingbirds. So hummingbirds, everybody loves hummingbirds. There's two of the most common ones. We'll go over a couple different kinds of species that are real common here. There's lots. There's other ones that migrate through that I don't really talk about. But so hummingbirds, if you put out a hummingbird feeder, you'll almost always get some attention to it. And then there's some plants that we can grow too. So the most common that I see here is called Anna's hummingbird. It's that hot pink neck on the males. So the males have the neck, right? The pretty colors. Females of all the species are just brown. So it's the males that you see when you really see that really bright colored neck. And that's a little more rare, but the first time I saw it, I was so happy. They're to me, they're a little more, well, I guess they're exciting because they're a little more rare, but that purple, dark purple, and those little, the bottom part of the neck comes out almost like a little point, and just a really cute little hummingbird with something different than that hot pink. And black chin hummingbirds, another one even more rare here, but you see them around if you attract them. So attracting hummingbirds is more the food is what hummingbirds want to come to. And that's hummingbird feeder or some of these native or adapted plants that provide nectar for them. And the same ones provide nectars for butterflies. So you can kind of do two things at once and have some beautiful plants out there in the landscape. I don't have too many in here, just to let you know. These are just kind of some of the real the ones that attract the hummingbirds the most, but there's tons out there that you can get that work this way. But tuberosa means hummingbird in Spanish. I mean, that tells you something right there. But its scientific name is Justicia californica. There's that is in full bloom, like in the spring, out in the desert in a wash, and it just whole bush is bright red from flowers on it. It's hard to see in detail right there, so I got a picture up close of the flower. And it's always those long tube flowers that hummingbirds love. They don't have to compete with the bees. Bees and all the other pollinators love nectar too, but none of them have that long, super long beak that hummingbirds do. So they get an advantage by selecting going to the flowers that have that long tube. Then they're the only ones that can reach that nectar, and they're not competing with all the other stuff out there that drinks nectar. So usually that's pretty common trait, is that the flowers that they like are these long tubes. Here's another relative of tuberosa, Mexican honeysuckle. That's Justicia spicigera. And it's pretty much the same thing, but orange flowers. This one is a little bit bigger leaf. Like if you want something a little more lush, it would like a little shade in the afternoon. Tuberosa would be full sun, and Mexican honeysuckle would like a little bit of shade in the afternoon just to stay healthy. They're both desert natives though, so they're drought tolerant all the way. This one just has a little bit bigger leaf. The flower show is pretty spectacular, but not quite as intense as tuberosa when they bloom. But they bloom for a longer period of time, if that helps. And they're orange instead of that red. Here's the one, everybody should have one of these in their yard. Hesperalo parviflora, red yucca. So red yuccas you see them everywhere. The flowers come in yellow too, if you want to mix it up and have one of each or whatever. And now you can buy varieties that are dwarf, like there's a smaller plant and the flowers are really, really dark red. That one's called brake lights. Like if you see a name on the tag, there is varieties now, cultivars, that you can guarantee what kind of flower you get and how big the plant's going to get. But any old-fashioned red yucca is going to be great for hummingbirds. And they bloom all summer long. They're amazing plants, and they're easy to keep, like bulletproof, can't kill them. And it's just something good to have around. One thing I see people do to hurt them though, never try to hedge these. People want to trim them. They don't know what to do with all the flower spikes when they die, but you have to grab each flower stalk and follow it down into the heart of the plant and cut it off with pruners one by one. If you try to like saw them all off with a hedger, and you get the tips of the leaves with the flower stalks, they never come out of it. The new leaves come out through that cut leaves, and it just ends up destroying the look of the plant forever. So try not to ever use a hedger on these. Other than that, I don't know what you could do wrong. Another one is aloe. This is medicinal aloe, so it's another kind of like permaculture or edible landscape type thing. This is the aloe you find in everything from smoothies to sunscreen now. You can use a leaf on a sunburn or a cut or anything else. It makes these really pretty yellow flowers. You can also get orange flowered ones. So either way, hummingbirds love aloe, any kind of aloe, and there's hundreds of aloes, by the way. Some grow into trees even. Just different varieties of aloes. This one's the hardiest and most common. Yellow flowered aloe vera is the hardiest one. It handles more sun than the rest of them do. But it's great to have around. Luckily I see them being used more and more, even in like commercial landscapes now. So it's a good thing. And hummingbirds, I'm sure, are loving it just as much as I am. This one doesn't follow the rule of those tube flowers, but I know it attracts hummingbirds like crazy. It also attracts bees and other pollinators, which are good for the environment too. A lot of people don't like bees because they sting, but it's that balance of an ecosystem. You know, they're all important to our environment. So all pollinators love fairy dusters, and there's a red fairy duster that comes from Baja California, and a native fairy duster that comes from just a little higher elevation than here, but they do great down here in the low desert. Either one of those does about the same for hummingbirds and pollinators. Honestly, if you want a more lush plant, the Baja fairy duster has a brighter colored flower and a lush plant. They can be a little frost sensitive on a really hard freeze, where the native one, like, there's nothing that could hurt it here. But either way, look into them both. Either one works for the pollination of hummingbirds. Very hardy plants for our environment here. Let's see. And ocotillos. Ocotillos are definite hummingbird magnets too. That does follow the rule of those tube-shaped flowers. I love it when they have flowers and no leaves on them. I don't know why. It's interesting to me that they don't have to have both at the same time like a regular plant would. But ocotillos are iconic of the whole Southwest. I mean, they grow from Texas into Chihuahua, Mexico, into Sonora, Mexico, everywhere in the Southwest United States and north of Mexico. They grow in the harshest of environments. The problem with getting ocotillos here is buying one in a nursery. Most of them that you find are bare root, which means they found them out somewhere where they're allowed to dig them up. And you have to get a tag to dig them up. You can't go out in the desert and just dig them up. I mean, it's kind of like a deer tag. Like, you get so many tags and you can harvest so many out of the desert, only out of designated areas where they let you harvest from. So people do it though, and they bring them in and they sell them to nurseries. And so they have 50, 60, maybe 100 feet of root going in all directions to gather up rainfall when it comes. And they chop all that off to about a foot long. And they usually deal with that. Usually, but it is a little stressful of a situation. They tie all the canes together with wire usually, so they're easy to move around. And so you buy one, you take it home, you bury that kind of 1 foot of root. You try to keep it standing up. Sometimes you need a stake to keep it standing up because there ain't a whole lot of root to hold it in place. You deep soak it one good time, like really deep soak it for a couple hours with the hose, so that soil packs in around the roots really good. You can blast it with the hose so the water really gets into the cracks of the roots real good. And then you don't touch it again until the leaves pop out, which sometimes can be 6 months or even a year. And then sometimes you lose them through all the stress, but it's helpful to squirt the sticks off right after you plant them. Don't water them again in the ground, but you can just kind of lightly sprinkle the sticks every once in a while, once a week or so, to keep them hydrated until those roots hopefully grow back. That's usually how you do an ocotillo here. Now more and more, I'm happy to see you can buy smaller of ocotillos. So don't let the side, if you can have a little patience, buy a smaller one that's rooted in a 5-gallon or a 15-gallon if you want a bigger one. But if it's rooted into a pot, and make sure they're rooted. If there's leaves on it, it's rooted. So try to find one with leaves on it in the summer, in a pot that's rooted into that pot, and plant it like that, and it'll just keep growing like nothing happened. No stress, nothing. So that's the best way to do it, but it's harder to find. And that's the deal with growing ocotillos. But definitely, and again, it's a native plant that attracts native pollinators. and hummingbirds. One tree on the list is a desert willow tree. There's that tube flower again, right? Long tube flower. Hummingbirds love them. They bloom all summer long. It's a wonderful tree they're native. I see them in the riverbeds. They're like a riparian tree. You know, they follow the washes and stuff. And the wild ones are, the flower is variable from like white to light pink to you never know. And the growth pattern is a lot of times real short and squatty and sideways, and it's hard to make them into a big tree. And they make long skinny seed pods, kind of like a vanilla bean looking thing. And those in the wild, those seed pods, they stay on them for a long time, and a lot of people think they look a little ugly, especially so this is a deciduous tree. The leaves fall off in the winter. That's what that means. And when the leaves fall off in the winter, these wild ones, they hold these seed pods on. I mean, it's natural, but nurseries these days have found varieties and clone those varieties, so you can get really reliable trees that grow upright to be turned into a nice little shade tree. Dark colored flowers most people prefer, like this dark purple and pink, or all dark purple. And no seed pods to speak of. Here and there they make a seed pod, but nothing like the wild ones. So if you're going to get one of these trees, I would recommend getting a named variety. And one of my favorite ones is called Bubba. You know, it'll be desert willow Bubba, you know. So find one with a name, and you'll be guaranteed that it's that kind. If you can't find one with a name on it, just go to the nursery in the summertime and get one with a flower already on it. And at least you'll know that it has the kind of flower you want. And if you see that it's kind of growing upright, that's the one for you. So you don't really have to find a named variety, but look into select one that grows upright and has the color flower that you want. But they is a wonderful addition to any yard and attracts wildlife. There's a picture of one. You're never going to want this tree to be lollipop shaped, single trunked. It's always should be multiple trunked from the ground like that. As that tree gets bigger and bigger, you could elevate the skirt, you know, to trim the branches that are in your way up a little bit higher, but never expose those trunks to the direct sun before the top of the tree is big enough to shade the trunks. So it's always a multiple trunk tree. And like I say, if you pick one that's upright growing, it'll get it up above your head much quicker and turns into a very nice tree these days. And I think that's it. So any questions on anything? I'm going to leave the PowerPoint up, I think, so I can flip back to pictures if somebody asks a question. Is that a good idea, Andrew?
Yep, that works just fine. Looking, no questions, only so far one comment from Amber saying that Summer Winds Nursery sells ocotillos in pots, but not bare root.
Perfect. Yeah, good for them.
And then another question just popped up. Can we grow milkweed from seed?
Yes, it's very easy from seed. It's like fluff, like cotton. So they make seed pods galore. Like every kind of milkweed makes these big seed pods that pop open, and like fluff comes out of them like cotton and flies away, like a dandelion kind of, I guess, or whatever. You know, the seeds are attached to like a big puff of white, and you can get those. Usually what I do is I get a pot of potting soil and I wet it really good on the surface, and I leave a big gap between the rim of the pot, maybe 2 inches of gap between the rim of the pot and the surface of the soil. So that, because if you don't, the seeds blow away off the top of the soil. So you put the seeds in there on top of the wet soil. You leave that 2-inch gap between the rim of the pot and the surface of the soil. You put the seeds in there on wet soil, and then you water it very gently. Many times I've blasted the water's on too hard, and the second the water hits the seed, poof, they all blow away. So it's like a really gentle stream of water out of a water wand and get it all real wet. But you leave them on the surface. I don't throw dirt on top of it, you know. And when they get wet, they do stick to the ground. I think that's kind of what they're made to do. I'm not sure, but it seems like when you get that fluff, that white stuff wet enough, it like sticks to the surface. And then I would cover the top of that pot with clear plastic until they sprout. If you're going to cover it, it helps a little bit to cover it to weigh them down, but I just not with a lot of soil. I mean, it is just a very light sprinkling of soil where you can still almost see the seed if you want to cover it with any. If you did that, you don't need the plastic, the clear plastic over the top. Either way, but they do come up very easily from milkweed. Desert milkweed grows really good like that here. It's coming up on the time to do it. I would wait till the nighttime temperatures are about 70 would be good. We're almost there. So as we warm up just a little bit, it'd be a perfect time to try that. If you don't have any seed, then you'll have to wait till you find some, or you can probably order it online. If you order it online, it might come with the fluff already stripped off of it, like just seed, and then it's even easier to plant like that. So, but they're also easy to collect off of plants that you find around with those big seed pods. That's it, I think.
Perfect. Let's see. So Brenda's asking, the bugs that look like sesame seeds that cover the milkweed, are those worth trying to get to spray off or get off?
Those are aphids almost for sure, and the aphids just love milkweeds. I don't know why, but they what I do is I hold my hand behind the branches so I don't break them off with the hose, and I blast them off with the water of the hose, and they come back. But every time you do that, it gives the plant a little break from it. And I mean, chances are, if you're working with monarchs or queen butterflies, they're going to eat they're going to eat off the same branches that the aphids are trying to eat, and the butterfly, the caterpillars are going to be much better at it. So I don't worry too much about it. I mean, if the point is more to get butterflies than to have a milkweed, then you just kind of let it all happen. But if you do want to protect, if you don't have any butterflies around, you just have a lot of aphids, they can slow them down. I don't think they would actually kill one, but they slow them down. If they get to the point where they're sucking so much sap out of the plant, it just kind of stops them from growing. So if you want to give your plant a little break from that, you put your hand behind it just so branches don't break off with the strong flow of water, stream of water, and you blast them off with just covering the end of the hose with your thumb like we do, make a squirter and wash all those aphids off. And for an aphid that's that small, you blast them 3 or 4 feet away from the plant on the ground, and they're never making it back up on the plant. The eggs that are left on the plant can hatch out and kind of repopulate over the period of a week or two, but it does good enough, I think, to kind of give the plant an advantage over the aphids. But that's what I do.
Perfect. One other question is, can we grow other species of milkweed, or just the desert milkweed?
You can grow many. There's one called butterfly milkweed that's very easy to find here. It has a prettier flower, I think, is why people choose it. I have to admit, I'm not a complete expert on each variety. I have heard people who know more than me about monarch specific butterflies, and I have heard that they prefer that some milkweeds are better for them, like health wise, even if they'll eat the other ones. So that you might look into, kind of what, if you're really concerned mostly with butterflies, monarchs in particular, you might search a little harder on what the best species of milkweed to grow for monarchs is. But they don't all grow well here. There's like the one in the picture there I got off the internet here, and it's big leaves. It's hard to grow here. The desert milkweed is by far the easiest to grow. So if you just want a milkweed that attracts butterfly, monarch larva, desert milkweed I would stick with. It's the easiest to grow. But there is a butterfly milkweed that we grow also, and it has a little prettier flower, which a lot of people like. So it depends on what you're looking for, but for just purely attracting butterflies with the easiest milkweed that grows here, desert milkweed is by far the easiest to grow here, and it's a native plant and all that. So this milkweed in the picture there is like, the leaves are so big it struggles with our heat in the summer, so they don't all work great here, even if one is a little better for monarchs. But there is several, some that I haven't even mentioned, other milkweeds that are capable of growing here, and if you find that they're a better food source for monarchs, they might be options too. But that's pretty much what I know about those. I know more about the plants than the butterflies. Sorry.
That's good, thank you. Amber just made a comment that some of the milkweeds carry a toxin, need to be cut back a couple times a year. so the toxin doesn't build up and harm the butterflies. And then there's also a leafless milkweed.
Yeah.
Another question is, once the monarchs are born, what's a good plant? What's the best plant for them to feed off?
What was the question?
Sorry, I got a little background noise here. Once the monarchs are born, what's a good plant for them to feed off of?
Oh, that's all these milkweeds we're talking about that monarch larvae eat. And that was a good point. So there, I didn't know about the chopping them back to let the, so it must be that like the toxins build up more in older growth. So that might be something to look into too. And the desert milkweed is the one with there's really no leaves on it. When the new growth comes out, it has a few kind of vestigial leaves, they call it, like they fall off right away. Like there's leaves on them, the branches when they first grow out, and those leaves fall off right away. That's the desert milkweed I'm talking about. It's like there's no leaves on it. It's just like gray sticks coming up out of the ground. I should put a picture in the PowerPoint for next time. And then there's a needle leaf milkweed that has leaves, but they're really skinny, like pine needles almost. I know that one grows very well here too.
Excellent. Another question, will the passion vine grow and survive in full sun?
I have seen them do okay in full sun. It's about keeping the soil really good. They can't dry out. It's definitely not a drought tolerant plant. So if you keep the soil, I would treat the soil under them that they're growing in almost like a garden bed. You amend it with some compost. You put a thick layer of mulch, like maybe wood chips on the surface. And then I have seen them, it'd be nice if when they first come, when they're small, that they aren't in full sun. I mean, I wouldn't plant one newly planted in the middle of a blasting gravel front yard in the full sun, but I've seen them start in a nice protected area, and whatever you're growing them on, because they do need some kind of support, you let them grow up a trellis or even a whatever fence or something, so that thing itself provides a little bit of shelter when they're young. But I've seen the vines that they grow that can be 20 feet long. They definitely can grow up into the full sun after that plant is like well established and is growing in good, rich, moist soil. So they can. Like I say, it's a difference between newly planted. I wouldn't put it out in the full blasting sun, but the vines can by all means grow up into the full sun after they get established.
Excellent. Those are all the questions I see. Amber just put another comment in there if you're able to see it, Jonathan. I won't read it, but if there's anything else, let's see.
I don't know if I push on.
Are you able to see the chat?
I didn't know if it would show on my share screen, which I can.
Oh, no. If you have it up now, we're not seeing it.
Oh, yeah, I do. Okay, then I can look at that.
All right. Well, if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to enter them in, or if you'd like to unmute and ask Jonathan a question, we have a small enough group. Feel free to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Or share. I always learn a lot too. So if you got info to share with the group, I'm sure everybody appreciated it too.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all we have. I don't see any other questions. Just some thank yous. So looks like we are good to go. Thank you very much, everybody who attended today. And we will share the presentation with all of you, and then anybody else who wasn't able to attend so they can watch it. And just a reminder, if you're a Goodyear water customer, feel free to fill out the survey, which you can expect in the next several days or week or so. And then you can get a low water use plant gift card if you have not received one already this season. And that's all I have. Thank you very much, everybody who attended, and hope to see you. Our next class is not 2 weeks from now. It is going to be on the 27th, which is going to be a virtual garden tour with none other than Jonathan himself, talking about some of the things that have worked really well for him in his yard and all the other kind of unique plants and situations. But it could be very helpful, especially if you have a lot of microclimates or interesting things in your yard that maybe have a struggle to grow certain plants. So I encourage you to join us then.
Yeah, thanks. That'll be fun.